What if I were to tell you that everything you know about mental health is wrong? I went into this industry, naturopathic medicine, focusing on mental health, and I got good results from my patients. But when I switched my focus to brain health, I started getting great results. Your brain has the ability to heal itself. We were fed this nonsense in school that the brain is plastic and not plastic, and that there's nothing we can do to make change. This has led us to believe that there's nothing we can do, and so we've done nothing. Even worse, this focus on medication has made the world look for a quick fix. How did we get here where psychotropics and psychotherapy are the mainstays for brain health? And it's the only organ that we don't even measure, we don't look at, yet we give diagnosis and therapy for. The system is failing you. It's failing your children, it's failing your family. It's time to change the way the world looks at mental health. So, what is happening in the world today? 41.5% of adults self report anxiety or depression. 20% of adults report having brain exhaustion. 55 million people have dementia, and that number is expected to double every 20 years. And 20% of people report insomnia. We are in a brain health crisis. And so, what have we done? We've spent billions of dollars on it. It should be getting better, right? Wrong. We've spent $225 billion on mental health. And that was in 2019 before the pandemic. We need to stop looking at the brain through the lens of mental health. It's a brain health issue and needs to be looked at. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Debbie Smrz, and I have a very strong focus on brain health. So first, let me tell you a little bit about my story. Just like you, I was an overachiever. I love adventure, slightly geeky when it comes to education and learning, but everything changed one September day. Now, until then, I was wearing the Superwoman cape and relishing in it. I was running a successful clinic, speaking nationally to other NDs, volunteering as a Girl Guide leader, volunteering at the hospital, coaching rugby, and still finding time to make my kids' birthday cake from scratch and be there every day when they get home from school. And then my daughter seemed to lose her mind. She dropped out of school at 12. Yep. Did you know that if it gets that bad, the school will send a homeschool teacher? It got that bad. She was initially diagnosed in the 50th percentile of anxiety, but first, let me reverse and tell you a little bit more. So this happened completely out of the blue for us. Until then, she was a normal kid. She went to school every day with her friends, and then we kind of had a bit of this perfect storm. It was a long weekend. She had friends over for a sleepover, so she didn't get enough sleep. There was a lot of girl drama going on, so she got some stress, and then she had sugar, and we weren't doing a lot of sugar in the house, so we were having this overload of inflammation. And then finally, the kicker of it all was that then she got strep. So she wasn't feeling well on the Monday, and I let her stay home. Tuesday, I said, sweetie, I think you're okay. You should really go to school. She ran downstairs, grabbed the biggest knife she could find, put it up to her neck, and said, if I made her go to school, she would kill herself. This took us completely out of the blue by surprise. She was initially diagnosed as being the 95th percentile of anxiety with emotional dysregulation. Yes, the psychologist told me she might kill herself, not because she's depressed, but because she can't handle her emotions. We hit all the knives and anything that could be used as a weapon. I barely went to work. I would sit in the car each day, mustering up the energy to come inside. I made a big hole in the backyard for that Superwoman cape. Didn't feel right to me though. I deal with kids with anxiety. Heck, I lecture to psychotherapists and naturopathic doctors on this issue. It was very humbling to be on the other side of the couch, but I still knew something wasn't right. Eventually, after many doctors, therapists, tears and fights, she was diagnosed with pandas. And in less than 10 days on antibiotics, I had my daughter back and she went back to school. This is one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about brain health. We're treating it like a psychological issue. If I had just believed in what the therapists were telling me, my daughter would probably be on antipsychotics at this time. She probably would never have left the house, have extreme anxiety, yet it was an infection. PANDA stands for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorder associated with streptococcal infection. So she got strep throat and it led to these neurological symptoms. We need to look at the underlying cause of all of these neurological symptoms that we are treating with psychotherapy and treating with psychedelics, antidepressants, antipsychotics, even insomnia medication. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Debbie Smrz. I'm a naturopathic doctor with a passion for optimization medicine, which led me to focus on anti-aging and brain health. So let's talk about some of the myths that have gotten us here. The first is the myth that fat is bad. This was really perpetrated in the 60s. Fat is not bad. There was this myth that serotonin is deficient and we need to do something to increase our serotonin in the brain. It's a myth. It's not a thing. Finally, we were told that our brains are fixed at birth and there's nothing we can do about it. They're not fixed. They're neuroplastic and we can change them. So how did this happen? Well, it really started in about the 1950s and 60s, where the sugar industry came into play. Now, what happened was we're starting to notice that sugar had a negative effect on the heart. But the sugar industry didn't want this to be widely known. So what they started doing was downplaying sugar's response and hyper focusing on fat and cholesterol. And so that took the shift away from sugar as being a culprit and instead being fat as a culprit. Now, until, 1920s, 1940s, we were eating mainly fruit sugars, if any sugar. So yes, it was steadily going up. Come the 1920s, we had this bit of a sugar revolution. This is when we started getting the refined sugars, when they started noticing cardiovascular changes with sugar. And then the food industry took over, and we just saw this exponential rise from the 1960s right up until the 2000s and beyond. And more people are eating sugar. Yet it's now been shown that it was really this, and by subtly making this switch, the switch from focusing on the war on sugar and moving into the war on fat, what happened was we decreased our fat consumption considerably. Commercials all came out on the benefits of no fat, low fat. I mean, heck, you're probably still doing it. When was the last time you had yogurt? I bet you it was a low fat or no fat yogurt. Yet it's the sugar in the yogurt that is so much more detrimental. How is it detrimental? Well, we know that sugar can cause aggression. There was a large study of 8,000 juvenile inmates. And this wasn't just one location. They looked at 12 different locations, different institutions. And what they did was they decreased some of the high sugar foods. They took away some of the pop with lower sugar, lower glycemic index foods. And they found that antisocial behavior and aggression decreased by almost 50%. That was a massive study done in 2007. What about cognitive decline? Well, a study in 2019 published in the National Library of Medicine suggests that excessive sugar consumption negatively affects cognitive thought. We saw a decrease in memory, verbal memory, impaired memory, and there's also a link to dementia. As a matter of fact, Alzheimer's is now considered type 3 diabetes because we're seeing the massive link between sugar and brain health. What about sleep quality if we're not worrying about cognitive decline? Well, a 2016 study found that people who consume sugar before bed had a harder time falling asleep, spent less time in that slow wave sleep that we want to see for healing and memory cognition. And one of the reasons that it's not just about the fact that we didn't put a war on sugar where we should have, but we put a war on fat. And so this means that we're not getting that quality fat that we want to. What about this theory that there's a chemical imbalance in our brain and that we all just need the little pill to make us feel better? This is what we were all fed up until maybe this year, that there's a serotonin imbalance. And so a $16 billion industry started in about the 1960s. And do you want to know the funniest thing? The first antidepressant was a monoamine oxidase inhibitor created for tuberculosis. So it was a drug that was made to help with an infection. And one of the side effects they found was people didn't seem to be as depressed. And so boom, our first antidepressant was made. To this day, they still don't know why antidepressants might work at making people's mood better. And you know what they found? They found it doesn't. A 2022-23 study, and this is a huge study. I want to draw your attention to this. It's a systematic review. So this is where they take all the research ever created on this subject. They look at the good studies, the bad studies. They decide which one should be kept in and kept out. And the amount of money, time, and effort goes into this is huge. And plainly, I want to read exactly what it says because this is so profound. The chemical imbalance theory of depression, or the serotonin deficiency, is still put forth by professionals. The general public widely believes that depression has been convincingly demonstrated to be the result of serotonin or other chemical abnormalities, and this belief shapes how people understand their moods, leading to a pessimistic outlook on the outcome of depression and negative experiences about the possibility of self-regulation of mood. The idea that depression is a result of a chemical imbalance also influences decisions about whether to take or continue antidepressants medication and may discourage people from discontinuing treatment, potentially leading to lifelong dependency on these drugs, even though the review is showing that they don't necessarily work and there is absolutely no such thing as a serotonin deficiency or a chemical imbalance theory in the brain. As a matter of fact, and if you've ever read any research articles, they almost always end saying things like, we believe there's no such thing as a chemical imbalance. However, more research needs to be determined before we can recommend XYZ. People very rarely do they want to commit. Well, what about here? This review suggests that the huge research effort based on the serotonin hypothesis has not produced convincing evidence of a biochemical basis to depression. We suggest it is time to acknowledge that the serotonin theory of depression is not empirically sustained, and we need to stop giving all of these antidepressants, not just because they're not working. That would be one thing. Yes, we don't want to put things in our body that aren't working, but more importantly, because we know that they can do harm. There was another systemic review where they're looking at the long-lasting harms from previous use of serotonin, and all authors concluded that the drugs had no beneficial effect. And that's fine. If you want to take something that has no beneficial effect, doesn't matter to me, except when it can cause long-term damage. We know short-term antidepressants can cause irritability, anxiety, panic, emotional flattening, dyskinesia, sexual impairment, which might not go away, by the way, even after you discontinue, and also suicide and aggression. Antidepressants also have stimulant effects. And rather than acknowledging this, what they've done, especially in kids, is just put them on more severe chemicals, such as bipolar medication, so antipsychotics. And these we know can have long-lasting effects. It can possibly change your brain and you can never come back out of it again. And antidepressants have also been linked to an increase in dementia. So here we have a product that might not be beneficial to you, and it's going to cause long-term effects. If you know it's helping you, and for some people it does, there are still looking at the theories around it. Some say it's due to the stimulant effect that it might be helping. Some say it's due to an anti-inflammatory effect that it can be helping. Heck, it could be due to that antimicrobial effect that we saw. Look at my daughter. Maybe she would have benefited from antidepressants because it does have an antimicrobial effect. Like the first antidepressant was a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So depending on how it's working on you, but it's not the reason. The reason of your depression is not because of a serotonin deficiency. So what we need to do is look at what those reasons are and support that. So what do? Measure it, mend it, maximize it. I don't understand how we don't measure the brain. We can. I actually just bought a $20,000 device because I want us to have the ability to measure the brain. We know that the brain works in waves. We know what normal theta waves do. We know what too many theta waves do. We know what normal alpha waves do. We know what higher low alpha waves do. And so we can actually measure these with an EEG on the head, and we can see how your brain is functioning. Why is this so important? It's so important because change only happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And it's painful. Like taking supplements is a pain. Doing what's healthy is a pain. Really trying to be good about it is a pain. But I'm going to say something different. In my opinion, change happens when we have measurable metrics and have something to work towards. I see people with diabetes coming in with their blood work and changing their entire lives. You know what we were taught in school? We were taught in school that diabetic people just have the personality type, that they're not going to make change. And that's why many doctors don't even talk about diet, and it really just becomes a medication thing. This is what is perpetrated into the world, yet I strongly disagree. Here is my brain scan, and you can see here the gray is the first time I did it, and the black is the second. I was able to increase my brain age by almost 10%. So this first one is looking at how much power you're able to put towards different parts of the brain when you're doing different activities. And you can see the visual below. There's not as much red there. So here's the power. This brain reaction time, this one's harder to change. This one is just more about who you are. Yes, it can go down over time for whatever reasons, but this is a lot harder to change in the body. And then this last one was physical reaction time. And you can see that I was able to put a lot more power into the brain. What did I do? Well, I mended my brain. So now that I measured it, I was able to mend it. So we know there is a massive gut-brain reaction. Neuroinflammation causes major problems in the brain, and different things can cause neuroinflammation, such as gut inflammation, such as bacteria overgrowth, candida overgrowth. So really looking after the gut is one very important first step to looking after the brain. We want to think about your immune cells. We want to think about how your brain detoxifies, and we want to make sure that we're not doing anything to increase that inflammation in the gut. So since we already had a little bit about our war on sugar, let's talk about sugar a little bit more. So let's compare Danone yogurt to a Kit Kat bar. Same amount of sugar, same amount of fiber, same amount of protein, same amount of iron. Heck, what's the point of having the yogurt? You might as well take the Kit Kat bar if all you're doing is trying to get that treat. So we know sugar is bad for us. And so it's time that we turn the war on sugar and away from fat. As a matter of fact, 70% of the dry weight of your brain is fat. And so we need to increase the amount of fat your body's eating. So let's load up on fats. Fats help with focus, they help with attention, they're anti-inflammatory, and they support brain function. As a matter of fact, you know how the keto diet first came about? It was for kids who were having epileptic seizures. And so they put them on this extremely high fat diet, and they found it decreased their seizures. And so then, of course, we all latch on to these different diets, and now the ketogenic diet is one that people are using for weight loss. That is a whole nother story. But think about that. A neurological issue was almost cured by high fat. And so let's get more fat in our diets. And I still have patients who are afraid of fat. They're afraid it's going to make you fat. Fat does not make you fat. Sugar makes you fat. Even fatty liver, we're now finding more than alcohol, it's sugar that's causing it. So let's turn that war on sugar up. I prioritize sleep. I actually wear a heart rate monitor, and I decided to really focus on this a little bit more. And so I took that focus on sleep, making sure that I was getting into a deep sleep, so that I was getting into those different wavelengths that I need to be to solidify memories, to really help with healing. We know that sleep reduces stress, it reduces inflammation. This is the only time where you can solidify memories. It enables growth and repair. And we actually have a detoxification system in the brain. It's called the glial system. And this only happens when you're sleeping. And so if you've had a concussion, if you've had anything happen, and now there is stuff in the brain that needs to be removed, it can only happen when you're sleeping. I mean, forget about a concussion. If you have inflammation in the body, which a majority of us do, more often than not, we do have some kind of dysbiosis going on in the gut. It is going to affect our brain in a negative way. There's so much research. I did an entire 2-hour talk to psychologists about the brain-gut connection. We can go on for hours, but the gut is so paramount when it comes to brain health. Most of your serotonin is made in the gut. It's not made in the brain, it's made in the gut. And so looking after your gut is essential. So doing a kind of a probiotic can be something to think about. So now we've taken away some of the toxins. I gave sugar as an example, but any kind of neurotoxin that you're putting into your body, we need to remove what could be causing the damage. We need to prioritize diet, prioritize sleep, look after our body. So once we've mended our brain, then we can maximize it. So I have a biohacking clinic. I really believe that technology can take us far in this world. And here I want to maximize it. So some of the things that I have is heart rate variability. So using heart rate variability, this was a study, and they found they were able to decrease depression by 60%, fatigue by 50%, anxiety by 46%. Why? Because truly when we have a measurable metric, we can then make the change to see what our body needs to do. Our body has the power to heal itself. We just need to give it a little bit of a nudge. So cherish your brain. It's the most complex organ you have. Nourish it. I've created a 4-step program where I do this with you. What kind of toxins do you need to take away? What kind of supplements should you take to really heal your brain? Do we need to heal your gut? There's all these different in-house testing that I can do to really see where you're at. And so if you're interested in working with me, I would love to do whatever I can to help you make your brain your best asset.